Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Atlas Lingue, the show that's all about language, culture, and communication. I'm your host, Luis Lopez. Now, for this episode, we guarantee you'll have a lot of fun, because this time we have not one, but two guests. Two Latinos who are great writers, actors, comedians, collaborators, but most importantly, friends. Michael Diaz and Jaime Fernandez. Michael is the creator behind the hilarious Juan Bago, a Dominican New Yorker best known for his candid, man on the street style of comedy, but one that always highlights and praises the cultural uniqueness of his neighborhood. He and Jamie, who co wrote and co directed the Audible series Michelle Rojas is Not Okay, are both co hosts of the Translators Podcast, an interview show that offers in depth conversations with Latina creators. And brace yourself because these two together are amazing. So, without further ado, here's our conversation with Michael and Jamie. So, first of all, Michael, Jamie, thanks for being on the show. How are you?
We're good.
Yeah,
Thank you for having us.
we're excited to be here. Thank you for having us on your show.
Of course, thanks. Um,
That's the only
I,
thing we had scripted.
okay,
Now everything's just gonna be off the cuff. Yeah.
perfect. I love it. So, I love that a lot of your content revolves around your everyday life, your upbringing, the people around you, your neighborhood. So, I'd love to start by perhaps asking you both a little bit about yourselves, about where you grew up and how that environment, in one way or another, shaped what you wanted to work on eventually.
Yeah, for me, I was born in New Rochelle, New York, up in Westchester area. And then my parents moved to Connecticut.
Hmm.
So predominantly my whole childhood was in Connecticut. I am Dominican American, but a lot of my family was in New York City.
Hmm.
So growing up, I was the only Latino in my school, or one of the only Latinos in my school. So I always had two worlds. When I'm
Right.
with my family, I'm with Dominicans speaking Spanish, and then my Monday to Friday while I was in school was English. And so it felt like I was in two different worlds that I felt like I wasn't completely fitting in. Um,
Okay.
then once I hit my early 20s, I moved to Washington Heights, which was around the time where I started creating content. And I always felt growing up that I had to always explain who I was and what my
I
identity was.
see.
And so that kind of guided my voice when I was creating content that's Dominican or Washington Heights. I felt that it was the muscle memory of me always saying, hey, this is what Dominican is, or this is our culture, because I always was at a point where I was explaining it. And so it sort of kind of was a thread of how I was creating content based on the way I was in Connecticut growing up.
I see.
And me, I actually grew up near Washington. I'm in Inwood, so like I'm like you could throw a rock, and it lands in Washington Heights. But so I kind of claim the Heights. When the movie came out, I wanted to be down, so I was like,
Okay. Okay.
"Hey, that's where I'm from." But
Right.
technically, I feel like that's where I'm from.
You can see my house from there.
You can see my house from here. Yeah, I'm one of the extras in the back. I'm just walking around like doing errands.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, and I also sing in public, but that we're listening
Oh,
over there.
yeah. Nothing to brag about,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. Only on the weekends. So I have a Puerto Rican mother, and my father is from Spain. So I had
Okay.
a very and so growing up in the Heights, all my friends were Dominican. So I had like it was just kind of the culture was all over the place. Like I felt like I was a part of a lot of different cultures when I was growing up,
Yeah.
um, but still always kind of felt not 100% comfortable claiming one, right?
Hmm.
Just and I don't know. I just feel like when you grow up I felt very very Americanized. I didn't learn Spanish fluent. I kind of just have the New Yorican kind of. I kind of sound like J Lo's a little better than me as far as speaking Spanish. That's how you can
Okay.
look at my Spanish. So I don't know. I guess I do sometimes feel like I should be more immersed in my different cultures that I'm from, that my parents are from. Um, but growing up in the city, growing up in New York, and around. many different Latino communities.
Of
I
course.
love, I love it. I mean, I love that's a part of me. You know what I mean? Like I relate to that. A writer and performer, that is what I'm drawn to as far as creating stories based on that because it's authentic to me. And they say write what you know, so I feel like that's a lot of the times is what I write. And comedically because
Hmm.
I'm comedy, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like you feel like we like to do that, but flip it with a little comedic kind of thing, which we don't really see in popular culture. Really, like our culture, kind of really like hitting the comedy hard. You know what I mean? I feel like
Yeah.
now maybe there's a couple things that are popping up where it's more comedic. Our culture's kind of showing our comedic side, but I still think we have a
Right.
long way to go. But that's a long-winded answer. But sorry about that.
No, no, but I love that. Like a way to use comedy as a way to showcase your cultural identity and the cultural diversity of where you grew up, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that that's something in common in that uh, like Latinos both in, as you said, Jamie, like having parents from different countries and like different backgrounds, but also just in your day to day life interacting with people from other places as well who also have like hyphenated or just very different backgrounds, right? I guess that's also part of the influence of just being surrounded by people from, and of course not only Latinos, right, but people from all over the world as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. And
So
Latinos, we have a specific. Again, there's you feel like there's topics that are not being hit because we don't get that much chances to kind of really tell our stories. So I still feel like there's a vast a vast amount of stories that we could kind of really we can write and create that we haven't seen yet. You know what I mean? Like
right.
I don't know,
Yeah.
like
I mean, again, like we're at a point right now where when there's a show or on a stream that's not specific, we still have more stories to be told, and I think that that's something that we're hoping to get out there more because an experience of a Dominican in the Bronx is not the same experience of a Dominican that probably is in Miami. Is there two different aspects?
Of course, yeah, certainly. Uh, Michael, could you tell me about Juan Bago? I know that like a lot of people also know you under this name, so
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about Juan Bago. How would you define him? Is he you? Is he like a character, like a sort of like a persona that you built, and what motivated you to originally develop Juan Bago?
Yeah, it's that's a great question that sort of, the way Juan Bago came to be was my first project ever was an independent feature called The Story of Juan Bago. And
Right.
originally I had in mind casting the lead, which was going to be Juan Bago. But doing an independent film with the budget and the scheduling, I decided just to take it. I knew that I can perform in that type of schedule. And so when the film was completed and I had to go out there and promote it and network, they were asking what the film is, and I was like, it's the story of Juan Bago, and I am Juan Bago. And so from there, I started having other projects that I was Juan Bago, but then there were other different characters that I played as Juan Bago, and it's sort of this comedic, you know, it just doesn't care. It's a sort of meta version of who I am because a lot of
Hmm.
times people say Michael Diaz, that's the business guy, that's the producer guy, that's the guy that you meet and we interact and we're taken care of behind the scenes. But then the Juan Bago is that character that I play comedically, either as some of the sketches that I've done in the past with some of the platforms, or if it's a podcast, it's the comedic meta version of who I am. But it all started with me making that decision of playing Juan Bago in a film that I produced, and it was just a necessity. So yeah, it's sort of organically just caught on to me, and through the projects made it my separate. Michael Diaz is this person, and Juan Bago is this person.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that so much, and I watched like, not the full thing, but like to just get an idea of of what it was, like the story of Juan Bago, and I thought it was so fun to see like the origins of the character, and also how you've developed Juan Bago, right? And so like over the years, you've you've continued to play him, right? And in like in your music parody videos and in
Yes.
your Bago briefs and all of that. So
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, like, how has it been developing this character over the years, growing with him, you know, and has he developed and changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's been something where, when I first started when I first started doing Juan Bago, and it was also when we did the comedy troupe Room 28, it was sort of like Juan Bago and like Friends, and then we morphed into this comedy troupe. But it was I was doing Man in the Street stuff, the interview
Right.
stuff as Juan Bago back in '07, '08, '09. I was doing it for a platform, and so even that
Yeah.
Man in the Street Juan Bago version has developed in a sense of the maturity and understanding the bigger picture because Bago Briefs, obviously, is comedy. I had Jamie in one segment, but it's sort of trying to interact with the community, but in a more mature way where it's sort of like maybe in '07, '08, more trolling just for humor. Now it's more for the
Right.
educational and for more of the understanding and kind of reading it through just the reps and experience. So, yeah, that version of me and Juan Bago has as my maturity of comedy and understanding of it and the reps, he has also been that version of me that's evolved and understanding the bigger meaning. Because, like what Jamie was saying before, and how you were saying, how comedy has a certain way to, show a lens and to learn and
Mhm.
experience, so has the Wambago version of me as well.
Now answer that question as Juan Bago.
I mean, that's quick right there. I'm like, yeah,
Wow.
exactly what he said, but not really.
Yes and no.
He takes himself
Right,
too.
right, right, right.
Michael takes himself too serious. Come on now, like what's going
Yeah,
on
yeah,
here?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, given the when Juan Bago started as a character, would you say like there is like a similar approach to Borat, you know, Sacha Baron Cohen's
Mm,
Borat, or Ali G, I think that's his name, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Like of this
yeah,
character very much from that era, from the 2000s, that like it looks at a way to like to provoke and to troll perhaps sometimes.
yeah.
And I don't know, and I noticed that like in more recent versions of Juan Bago, it's been different. It's changed certainly, but like, would you say that there was some similarities in that style of comedy when it started?
Yeah, yeah, and it's so interesting because the challenge of doing the latest version of Bago Briefs is
Mhm.
that working with him, he brought a different type of comedy. Like he's giving me advice before I go into Man in the Street, and it's one of the things I
With
was thinking
Jamie, you mean,
about.
right? Of course.
With
Just saying
Jamie,
it
yes,
for the
yeah,
audio version where we
yeah,
can't
yeah.
see it.
Jamie Bago.
Jamie
Yeah.
Bago.
Yeah.
We're revealing that in the next
Right,
one. He's
right.
actually my cousin.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
so with Jamie, because that like the last version of it where I did was I want to kind of mix certain things, and so Jamie is the friend that doesn't give me the right advice, and so I had to. There's a fine line between acting a certain way with him and then going in the street and not acting like a completely different person. But I feel like there's a lot of comedy now. Right now, it's very popular. The interviewing in the street and
Right.
making the person that's being interviewed the butt of the joke, and
Yeah.
it's more of like the gotcha. And I knew that there's a backlash, and that's to me, I feel like that's low hanging fruit. But there are topics that naturally they didn't have to do anything specifically with older generation of Dominicans and Latinos and Washingtonites. It's just an older generation. And so I knew that there were some parallels that I was asking them questions that they may be like, oh my God, I've been doing this. So the trolling
Yeah.
comes from like, but wait a minute, you've been doing this and you're against it, but you've been doing this. So it's being more surgical in the aspect of being trolling, but not trolling to make them the butt of the joke, but more
Yeah.
trolling to bring the awareness that there is a little bit of the double standard. So that's where it came with the maturity of Juan Bago and understanding how to get certain answers from people in the street without them feeling like I'm not doing this. I'm feeling offended.
No, of course. Yeah, no, and I really love that when I watched like some of the videos of the Bago briefs, the Bago briefs, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that you talk about like yoga or crypto or CBD, all of these like things that we could maybe consider trendy, and like maybe older generations wouldn't like maybe understand them or be into them and that sort of thing, right? And then seeing their reactions, I love it because initially I thought that it might be like what you were saying, like making them the butt of the joke. But then I loved how you developed it and kind of turned it on its head and make it like, I don't know, like showing the wisdom of the everyday person, right? And just like
Mm-hmm.
realizing how attuned to these things they are already,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I think with a lot of these men on the streets, when you see on TV, you're like, sometimes you're like, is this like made up, or like, are these
Yeah.
actors? And when you the way the people that he could encountered in the Bago briefs, they're so authentically like uptown Latino Washington Heights, you know what I mean? Like that,
Yeah.
they're not actors. These are real reactions, real people. And I think that authenticity like comes out, even especially with that, because it's just like, oh, I know this, like, 70-year-old Dominican lady. That is not an actress. She's legitimately bugging out about
Yeah. Yoga.
yoga.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I
Eso
thought,
yoga.
I really thought yoga was gonna be so easy. And the
Uh-huh.
fact that I got such backlash from a lot of individuals in Washington Heights about yoga opened up my mind. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. It's an exercise. And it's like we tend to live in a world of social media and internet, but there are
Yeah.
still a generation of people that are not connected to that. They're just every day doing their thing. And so they're not going to answer or react the same way we're going to react, because they're just in their own little world and they're not going to be giving the same answer.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, of course. I really like the yoga one in particular because of that, right? Like you see people have all of these, like even religious or spiritual, perhaps aversions or at least discomforts to the word because I guess they don't understand it the way that we do, and so I really found it so interesting to see that. Like as you were saying it, I also was quite surprised that like people didn't know about yoga or just like were able to define it as easily as we assumed that we would, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know, I guess I also wanted to ask you about, I mean, in these videos there's always a scene with you two, right, where you like sort of
Yes.
come up with the idea, and I wanted to ask you about that, like, because I feel like that's sort of a key moment, of course, right, where
Mm-hmm.
you think about like what to do and like what to sometimes sell or pitch or just share in your video. And so what is that process like? Like do you like sit down and write like what are you thinking, or is there like some improvisation element to it as well?
I'll let Jamie answer this because
Okay.
I did when I did the pilot of Bible Briefs, it was about the term Latinx, and it
Okay.
was a different type of format of the show. And when I told Jamie, I was like, I'm doing the season 2. He's like, Yo, I want to be involved with it. I want to be the expert. Let me take care of that. And that was scripted, but that was Jamie who came in with that vibe that he provides before I go ahead and do this experiment and then test out the experiment. But I'll let Jamie answer that because he was the one that was solely in charge of writing those scenes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, I wanted to, I was, I mean, he had asked like, hey, if you want to do anything in it. And I was, if I'm going to do something, I kind of want it to be like, I don't want to just have like one line and out. I want to have like a recurring thing, but not too much to take away from everything else. So I was like, everybody has like that friend who gives bad advice. So I was like, I could be the guy who kind of just giving you, like, I feel like before he actually goes out and goes out into the street, actually, does things and tries things out. It would be funny if he actually had someone who kind of gave him really, gave him kind of a summary of, and the audience a summary of what the show's going to be about. But just does it in a really dumb way. He's like, this guy knows a little bit, but not that much. And
Right.
his advice puts Bago on a path that is going to be a little bit um, of a problem for him, because
Right.
Bago doesn't completely have all the information that he needs. And
Yeah.
so,
So he knows
yeah.
just
And
enough to be dangerous.
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, that's it.
That could
I
be
think that's gonna be
the
the
tagline.
tagline for
All
the
right.
next season.
Yeah, I give him a sprinkle of truth, and then the rest is just like my opinion that is probably not that, I would not that accurate. And then he goes
Right.
out into the world and does what he does. So I thought it was a good, like, it kind of had a different vibe than everything else in the episodes. But it was short enough just to give you that little bit of, like, kind of awkward, kind of back and forth comedy, which again, it was scripted, but when me and Mike get on the camera together, there's always going to be some sort of improv that gets kept.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So out
Yeah.
of all the takes we do, there's a bunch of improv that stays there because it's just fun. Like, we'll laugh right after the cut. We're laughing
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's just, and we were like trying to hold it in during the take.
Yeah.
But so we're like, you know what? I think that's the one we're gonna keep. The one where we just like bugged out and just did some crazy stuff off the top.
Yeah. And it's so funny because it's like we all have a friend that doesn't give good advice, but they're so confident.
Yeah,
They
right.
convince you with their confidence. And like he was like that. And he even with the crypto where he's like, hey, you can do this, you can do that. And he's like, hey, can I borrow, a couple of dollars? And I'm like, hey, for that? Like, nah. It's like, wait a minute.
Oh, yeah.
So it's sort of in the sense of that.
And then he just keeps it, right? Like,
Yeah, he just keeps it because it's like, hey, don't question me. I just gave you some free advice. Go out there and don't worry about me. So that's what was really refreshing in those scenes. It's like by the time you saw the third episode, you're like, all right, what is this overconfident
Right.
guy gonna tell? And
Yeah.
Bago's gonna take it. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
let's see the little bit of the train wreck with the experiment that never works because this guy, he never questions him.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So then just to recap, Juan Bago is this sort of meta version of yourself, right, Mike? Who's like a
Yeah.
character, of course, on his own, but also very much sort of, well, he's very much you, but also, from what I understand, a distillation of you, right? Of certain
Yeah,
elements.
like a
that you-
like a Larry David type in a sense,
Right.
where when you watch the show, it's not completely him, but there is sort of the truthness of what that is. It's a heightened version of that.
Yeah. Uh, so I like that, and in that sense, do you find that, like, when you are Juan Bago, you kind of have the chance to behave differently than when you are Michael Diaz, like on the street or wherever?
Yeah, yeah, and the truth of the matter, like I've had like the challenge at times of being the producer and being Michael Diaz and Juan Bago in the same project is that at times I have to turn on that switch and be the Juan Bago, and that's
Yeah.
sort of the challenge that has been for me throughout the years that I've worked on and learned, and also trust the team, right? So to
Yeah.
have a team that I can be like, okay, it's Juan Bago time, especially when I'm doing the man in the street stuff. If I'm
Yeah.
Michael Diaz and I'm not on, you're not going to see the version of what you saw in Bago Brief because these people are like going back and forth and they'll eat you up alive. And there's a lot, especially during the time that I was doing it, people are ready to go. Like you're interrupting. So I had to just bring it. And so that sort of, I had to trust my crew to be like, we got this, Bago, go. So it's that, but also when I'm doing these smaller projects, I have to trust my team because if not, then Michael Diaz will spill in to the in front of the camera.
When you said it's Bago time, it just made me. That sounds like a catchphrase. Like
Oh, yeah.
once you just transform, it's Bago time, and then
And you get like
that's
a
two. That's two of
moment.
them.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Love it. And I also wanted to talk about your music videos and your music comedy as well. I really love them because I feel like they're a great mixture. Like, obviously, the lyrics and the situations are super funny, and the video enhances that. But you can also clearly tell, or at least I can clearly tell, that there was a lot of care put into the music as well. Like, it's got great beats, and I think it just works so well because, I mean, I hear a lot of musical comedy, and for me, as someone who is a musician and like really loves to listen to music, like sometimes when the comedy is purely in the lyrics or in what they're saying, but the music is sort of like an afterthought, it kind of turns me off a little bit. So
Yeah.
I really like that your musical parodies and musical comedy is not that at all. Like the music is like really actually good, and on top of that, the lyrics also make you laugh. So I don't know,
Yeah.
is that balance important for you as well? Like to find the good balance between the music, the lyrics, the video, and everything?
Well, that's kudos to the music studio and the production. When we did Bago and O, it was a one night stand. We literally the Oscar Martinez and I was Juan Bago. At that time, I was helping out my business partner who had a studio and we had a production company. So the
Mm-hmm.
person that actually was the voice for and the person that was the voice for me was working in that studio. And they had such a respect and perfection of the music. And so, in some ways, if we created these parodies and it was just a bunch of us are like, hey, let's go ahead and do it, maybe that's not the case. But because we were partnering up with a studio that really wanted to have great quality on its own, and oh, by the way, it's funny. Kudos to
Mm-hmm.
the Nibs brothers. Tommy, who was the voice for me for Pan Con Queso, he passed away back in 2020. He
Mm-hmm.
was a perfectionist. He wanted to make sure the music was great. And then on the end, on the production end, we were working with Gil Flores, who he was not from the world of comedy, but very like cinematic type of style. So we put the cinematic style of shooting with music that was very emphasized that had to be on point, and then the comedy
Yeah.
was infused in there. And that's why we've had a bunch of videos that were on Moondos and MTV3 back in the day, because they knew that wasn't the standard type of parody, that there was a lot of thought and a lot of work behind the scenes.
Yeah, and a lot of production value, right?
Yeah.
And like really, really taking it seriously
Mm-hmm.
as a product, of course. So now I guess uh, uh, we can move on to like a couple of other subjects.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Translators podcast as well as like just the other different things you've been working on. I guess before the podcast itself, I wanted to ask you, what are some things that you wish more people prioritize when representing Latinos in media?
That's a great question.
Mm.
That's a great question. You know what? The reality is we need to emphasize the art. I understand
Mhm.
completely. We had an episode with comedians on Translators, and it was like, by the way, we're comedians who are Latino instead of the title in
Right.
front of what that art is. And I think we need to emphasize that more and more and more, because I feel like when you put Latino in front of it, they'll be like, "Oh, that's a great, funny Latino comedian." But then it's like,
Mm,
"Oh, but for what? For a Latino or in
right.
general?" So I think when it comes to that, focus on the actual art and quality, because at the end of the day, it's a sort of a side thing to be like, "Oh, that's great," but mainstream, nah, not really. And I think we really need to
Mm,
emphasize that, because at the end of the day, there are some great, great content creators that are Latino, that it doesn't matter what the background is.
right.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I'll also say like the variety. I don't think we have enough variety as far as how we're portrayed in media, right? And I think I like the podcast space because the podcast space you actually do have a lot of Latino podcasts that are different and that are not you can't
Hmm.
put in a box like, oh, this is a Latino show. I feel like when you see TV shows and movies, you could put a lot of them, maybe more than half of them, in a box of like, this is kind of what we've seen. These are characters that we've kind of seen in the past that Hollywood will allow us to show.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to us, and there's a lot more stories that are not being told uh, about us. And when I say us, the whole kind of uh, you know. Diaspora. Am I using that right? The diaspora of the
Diaspora?
diaspora,
Diaspora.
right?
Yeah.
Diaspora, yeah.
Cut that out.
No,
No,
that's
but you know what I mean. Like,
If you want to
diaspora, that's
repeat
the
it, you can
clip.
go. We can edit it. It's okay.
no. I mean, I actually think it's funny if I say it,
Okay.
cut it out.
Okay.
But
Okay.
the but yeah, like where there's so many subcultures within the Latino culture. So, if I don't think that we have enough of a I don't think that we get enough of an opportunity to tell stories from the whole spectrum of the Latino culture, right? We
Right.
get
Yeah.
certain opportunities and chances, and when those fail, then we're kind of like everybody's kind of trying to get crumbs, right? And so
Yeah.
I would just variety, like
Mm-hmm.
tell more of the stories out there from all the cultures, the Latino cultures that that are beautiful in their own way and have distinct and similarities, but also differences from each one. Show those stories. Give us more of a platform
Mm-hmm.
to tell those stories.
Certainly. Yeah, like more, I mean, of course, Afro Latino and queer Latino stories,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
like all the other intersections in different countries as well, that are perhaps less represented than you like than others, right? Than average. So
Yeah.
And you have to kind of make those distinctions, because it's easy for a Latino celebrity to just kind of say, "Hey, our Latinos need more representation," but it's such a broad statement, and there's
right,
so much more. Like there's layers that you really have to peel to kind of see how deep the lack of representation is. It's not just it's not just Latinos in general as a broad concept. It's like there's individual parts to it that you need to that there are parts of of our culture that are not getting any representation,
right.
and then and then others that are just getting little representation. So we gotta dig deeper when we talk about things like that.
Yeah, and I think as you said, like having like perspective, like Latinx perspectives as well, right? Like not only, I guess, as you were saying, like if you put the adjective in front, like a Latino comedian may like have some like certain audiences may be predisposed to think of that in a certain way already, right? And so maybe instead of that, just having, as you said, a comedian who is Latino, like will give a perspective on a topic that isn't unique to the
Mm-hmm.
Latino community, right? But but however, their perspective will be unique or will be like influenced by their own
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
upbringing and knowledge and everything, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, okay, in that sense, I guess I'd like to talk about the Translators Podcast now. How and why did you decide to? Sorry, I'll repeat that again
Mm-hmm.
for editing. How and why do you decide to start the Translators Podcast?
Well, we did an early version of it a long time ago, and that version was specifically like we wanted to do an inside the Latino actor studio, where it was like we're
Oh, I see.
focusing specifically on Latinos and the process, and so not they're not really like pitching any a project or anything like that. They're just talking about their what made them want to become an actor, and then kind of their process and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
we did that. Not a lot of episodes, but we did that around 2015,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then we ended up doing another podcast after that really ended up being more uh, that we became successful at, Latinos Out Loud.
Right.
And shout out to Latinos Out Loud, which is still on.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Rachel La Loca. But that show became successful, and that show was more comedy. We interviews with Latinos. It was kind of the same thing, but
Yeah.
but it wasn't kind of like as specific as the Translators one that we had did before that. So both of us were no longer on a podcast, and we were like, maybe let's resurrect Translators, and so with the same kind of with the same kind of specificity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, take three. um with as far as talking to Latino creatives, so we wanted to open it up more to Latino creatives instead of just actors,
Yeah.
and just kind of get them to tell us, we focus on the three P's. You want to
Yes.
tell them the three P's?
Yeah. Passion,
The passion that they
which
have.
is that specific creative. What was their passion and why they picked that? And then there's the path. What did they do after they knew they were passionate? Where did they take their career? And then currently their process, how they maintain it, like what they do to do the type of creative that they do. So for us, we because we did Translators, we spoke about like how Juan Bago has evolved. For us as podcasters, we knew we needed to refine the original version of it and sort of get to a point where we're very specific. We knew that these are creatives, and we wanted to kind of get in the nerd part of the history, right? So if we had actors, our monologue would be talking about the history of
Right.
Latino actors and how we are to the present time. So there is that educational part in the beginning. And then understanding that whoever you're going to hear on the podcast, they're not here to promote anything specific. We just want to know how you started it and where you're at now. So if you're just an
Yeah.
actor or anybody, it's not just a conversation. Oh, that person's funny. They went on rants. No, like the conflicts that they went through, how their family was reacting. So that if you're because what we came from is that we didn't have people that we saw on television or in films that we could be like, oh, let me see how they did it. And so for us, we wanted to do this show so that if you are inspiring, you could look at a director or a TV writer and be like, okay, cool. This gives me a little bit of a foundation to understand what I need to do. And oh, by the way, once I'm there, maintaining it. Because we don't hear enough podcasts talking about, well, okay, you're there now, but how do you
Yeah.
maintain to be consistent? Because a lot of times it's that one hit wonder or that one opportunity, then you're back. So we wanted to do that. So I think for us and having so much experience in Latinos Out Loud, we knew we wanted to apply it to be very specific, very refined, so that it could be evergreen, that you could hear an episode from 5 years from now and it still stands.
I love that. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Latinos Out Loud because I actually was going to ask or mention it in the conversation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I really like it, and also Studio Ochenta has been on, like our founder and CEO Lori Martinez and our
Mm-hmm.
editorial manager
Oh,
Mario Lombardo talked about our show Azafata in Atacama, their adventure in Atacama in English, and also Isabela Gomez, who was recently on La Cabina Telefónica, was recently on the show as well. So like,
yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
we love it. It's a lot of fun. And however, I do like that you make that distinction of like this of the Translators podcast having this very specific goal as well. Of I love this sort of chance to inspire other creators by way of just letting them hear the experiences and sources and even I guess also the frustrations and challenges of your different guests, right?
Yeah. I mean, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
No, I mean, as a fellow podcaster, you know that the beauty of podcasting is that you can be niche,
Yeah.
and you'll find an audience with the niche thing. I mean, and I mean, not saying that interviewing Latino creatives is niche, but in Hollywood it is, right? And so we're
Right. Yeah.
talking to a lot of people who are in Hollywood, writers, directors, actors, and they, if we don't give them the platform, if Latinos who are doing, shows like this, and if we don't give them the platform, Johnny Studio Head is or TV producer guy is not going to, right?
Right.
So that's why we get so specific. We want to talk to Latino creatives because it's like, who's talking to Latino creatives? It's got to be us,
Yeah. Yeah.
and anyway, Mike, what were you going to say?
Well, the thing about it is this, right? So a lot of Latino creatives, they're gonna go on the circuit and they're gonna talk about their specific project. And so we're comedians, so we're gonna bug out, we'll have fun. And the same thing with Latinos a lot. You're gonna bug out and have fun. But what we wanted to do with translators is, okay, we're gonna bug out, but let's get to know you and how you started, that uniqueness. Because a lot of 9 times out of 10, when they do have an opportunity to promote something, they're not getting into that because it's like, okay,
Right.
you're gonna have this period of time. Oh, we're bugging out. We went on rants. What did you do last weekend? This is not that. This
Mhm.
is we want to know how you started and what got you to pivot, because a lot of times we've discovered that there was a mistake or a failure or something that then led them to pivot to do what they're doing. And so I think we wanted to be that space for somebody that when if you have a Radel Ortiz, for example, he's
Mhm.
going to bug out when he's on the podcast, but when he's on ours, we wanted to know, oh, when he was in high school, he was doing these little messing around and led to him have a muscle memory to then create where he's creating now. So we wanted to have that space that you knew that when you have a guest on our podcast, we're going to see a different version of them, or you're going to hear a different side of them that you could take
Yeah.
on and be more inspired than seeing the final product. You're going to see how they cooked.
Yeah. I love that. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, I don't imagine you have one specific favorite interview or guest because I know from
Mhm.
seeing and listening to the show that, I mean, of course, they've all been so much fun on the show and talking to you. But um, what were maybe a couple of moments or interactions that were perhaps a pleasant surprise when you were recording, either because they made you laugh when you least expected it, or maybe because they were like a particularly revealing moment from one of your guests?
I mean, for me, it- because I'm, I say quote unquote inspiring TV writer, but that's our goal, right? And when we had Yamin and Dominic, especially as a writer, and like the imposter syndrome of being in a writer's room, and there's not enough Latino writers or writers that are
Mm,
Latino in writers room. It could be very intimidating. Or when we're pitching some of our projects that are very specific, that
yeah.
Hollywood's like, whoa, we can't relate to it. Hearing their journey, especially Dominic, who was an actor first, and then you have Yamin, who were some of my biggest videos that I did when they were viral was him as my boss in Flama for Univision. Hearing their journey was like, all right, this is not overnight. This is a process. There's some dark moments as a content creator, writer. That was one of my favorite ones because it was ensuring that our journey that we're going through right now is quite normal and yet can get dark because you're like putting your heart on paper and then you're hearing notes like, yeah, that's just too Dominican or that's just too New York. And for us, it's like, well, that's where the truth comes from. He's saying it. He was like, yo, we're writing where we're coming from. So hearing them and their journey was one of my favorite one as an individual that is writing.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember what stood out. We had some episodes with stand-ups.
Mhm.
We had Gina Birion, and she would talk about how she she would they would book her a lot for Latino shows, right?
Mhm.
And it was hard to get out of a box to just be considered a stand-up comedian as opposed to a Latino stand-up.
Right.
And the same when we had
Gaster and Ian
Gaster and Ian
Lara.
Gaster Amante, Ian Lara, two really funny stand-ups. They had the
Yeah.
same issue. They don't want to be put in a box, right? And it's easy when you're first coming up to only kind of be pushed into to do certain material or to to have a certain persona because you're Latino, right? And when you're just trying to be funny, you don't want to have to deal with like, oh, these are the parameters of how you can be funny for for a mainstream audience, where they'll accept you. And it's so, I mean, Gina had the issue, she was also a woman in comedy, which is another, another obstacle,
Yeah.
in a boys club, such as being a stand-up and stuff like that.
Of course.
So, yeah, it's like we'll be laughing through an interview and keeping it light. But when it gets serious, like we're not afraid to go there
Hmm.
because, there's a lot of really, there's a lot of issues that these Latino creatives encounter in on their path to where they end up. Everybody we talk to is pretty successful right now. So, but on their path to success, there's usually some obstacles that they have to go over. Um, and
And real quick
Yeah.
to piggyback, let's not forget that a lot of the guests we have, the majority, are kids of immigrants that came
Hmm.
to this country. And so they're not like, oh, you want to get into arts? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
You
right. Yeah.
it's like a lot of times mainstream, they have the luxury of their parents being like, go ahead, do whatever you want. These
Right.
individuals that we had, the majority of them really had to take that chance. They really had to prove, they really had to be serious. And they had an extra
Right.
conflict because a lot of these parents wanted them to get a professional job. And so they had to go. And so we know that there's a generation of people that are listening or that are inspiring that are dealing with that. It's not as easy to be like, I want to be a stand up comedian. Thanks. No, it's not when your parents come from another country to succeed for you to be like, yeah, I just want to get into arts. So that was also a common thing that we seen as guests with their path. After they have that passion, how do they get to that path when you have those conflicts with your own family?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love all of this because I love how you create this space where obviously you can have a lot of fun and be really funny and laugh at each
Mm-hmm.
other, but also at the same time, like allow like the real discussion to come up, right? And all
Mm-hmm.
of these struggles that are often overlooked by people who didn't go through the same things, right? So just having a chance to listen to those struggles by people who you're already seeing as successful, I guess is such an integral part of it, right?
I mean, we have tissues nearby, so if people want to cry, we're ready for it. It's like, hey, let it out. Don't be afraid. Like,
Yeah.
We gotta get sponsorship for the tissues.
We learned a lot from
Barbara.
We learned a lot from Barbara Walters, R.I.P. Growing up. So yeah.
So I guess just one last question about that before I do a very quick lightning round of questions at the end.
Yeah.
Just basically, what are your plans with the show moving forward? Are there like, I don't know, other topics, other guests, or other things that you want to work on or to include in the show?
Yeah, well, we had eight episodes. Each episode was a different creative. There are still space, right? We didn't tackle authors. There's different topics that we want to
singers.
Yeah, we didn't even touch music. So
poetry. We know some poetry. So yeah, our first season, 8 episodes. It was a tight first season because every first season you're still learning and you're still finding out about different aspects of the show and how to get better for the and I think we did learn a lot as far as the first season that we'll take into season 2. So we're hopefully, which leads us to we definitely are doing
so we're doing the exclusive season 2. We're recording. Yeah, I mean we're working on doing a season 2 and getting more different topics of different type of creatives for sure.
And also, continuing kind of our educational stuff. We like to throw in actual history stuff in each episode, making it funny. But I think it gives a little bit of, right before the interviews, it kind of gives it a little bit of unique. People can see us do what we do. You know what I mean? Because as comedians, we do kind of also want to share that with the audience. So I think that those first 10 to 15, 5 to 10 minutes is just us kind of being us. And then once we get into the interview, people are already kind of, okay, I'm ready to go on for the rest. I'm ready to like stick with it for the rest of the episode.
Okay, yes. Stick with it.
Yeah.
Don't leave.
Awesome. Don't leave.
Don't, please stay.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I guess now I just have 3 very quick lightning round questions. First one, what's a song that always cheers you up?
Pump Up the Jam.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, of course.
If I hear that song anywhere, I'm like, all right, I want roller skates. I want to roller skate somewhere.
I'm upset because that's also my answer, to the point where I have a year-old, and from him being 2 months old, I was playing him Pump Up the Jam. I would be like, hey, Google, play Pump Up the Jam. And if I play Pump Up the Jam right now, this kid loses it.
Were you really going to say
Pump Up the Jam is the one there.
We've never talked about Pump Up the Jam. I've known him for like more than 10 years. This was not
prepared.
Yeah, this is the Barbara Walters moment too. Like, he did so much research. He found out.
Wow.
To the point we are losing it logistically here. Wow, we're out of character right now. Wow.
Yeah.
It threw us off. That question threw us off. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for not asking that in the beginning. We would have been right off the rails.
Yeah. Okay. Second question. What's your favorite example of a thing abuela says, like "ponte un suéter," that sort of thing?
Ooh. Look, I never really kind of grew up with my grandparents, so I have to take my mom's.
Okay.
But she would be like, "Mira, la vida no es fácil."
Okay.
And so I feel like she would just say that randomly, even if I was just gonna go outside to play basketball.
Right.
Oh yeah, mira, la vida no es fácil. And I feel like that was just one of those things that I always remember her kind of telling me as advice.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like depressing.
I know,
but it's real. It's real.
She saw you you're like in a really great mood. You're like, mira, la vida no es fácil. Damn, y'all.
Yeah, playing video games. Hey, la vida no es fácil. I'm like, what? I'm just trying to play Super Mario Brothers. What is going on?
With my grandmother, my mother's mother, she really is always emphasis eat. Like, I just came back from Dominican Republic right now, and it's just like, she'll look at me, ¿tú comiste? ¿Tú quieres comer algo? Like it's
Okay.
been like that all my life. No matter if it's at her house, my mom's house, and no matter what, she's always looking at me like one on one. Mira, tú comiste, tú quieres algo para comer? I'm like, okay, fine, full stomach.
Even if you just ate, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. ¿Tú quieres más? And now that I have my son, she looked at it like, comió. ¿Quieres algo comer? I'm like, all right.
It's a love language, right?
Yeah, it is.
Certainly.
You can't be on a diet. You can't be on any sort of diet and be around like older people in your family. You know,
No,
they're just gonna
no,
keep
no,
like,
no.
you want this, you want that, and it's like,
Yeah.
I already ate. Like,
Yeah, never. You can't.
yeah.
There's no calorie count
There's no-
with the older Latinos.
yeah.
Ah, what are you talking about diet? No.
¿Qué es eso? Keto.
Keto.
¿Qué
Yeah. Throwback to the episode of keto.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Great job.
Nice. So, final one. If you somehow had the chance to, I guess, magically bring someone back from the dead to interview for the Translators podcast, who would it be? And it can be someone from before the podcast era, if you'd like from 100 years ago or whatever.
Oh
you know?
wow. Yeah.
Wow, dude. I'm like the lane.
I might pick two, right?
Okay.
Just because they're too different. But like, since I'm a comedy head and Freddie Prince from Chico and the Man. Because there's a lot people don't know about him. Like he really kind of was like a young Latino comedian in the 70s blowing up and being on a primetime show was not the norm, you know? And so I think he did pave the way for a lot of, future TV, for the guys like George Lopez who came out and Paul Rodriguez had a show. He was the first, right? But his career was cut so short that it's like we never really got to, and he also co-hosted the Tonight Show for Johnny Carson sometimes. So there's so much to him, but he died so suddenly and tragically that I feel like we don't know anything about. There's no interviews with him, and I just love to just talk to him, pick his brain, and I don't know, and just kind of be around that comedy genius of his that we were kind of not really. We didn't get to see like for a long period of time. And the other one, quickly, Raul Julia, who I thought, was one of the best actors, Latino actors. And he also, he had a long career, but I think his, we would have got a lot more great performances from him if he didn't pass away when he did. So, those two would be on my, my season, my what if season of the Translators.
That's your AI chat GPT version. If we did that, right? We would get that. Mine would be Cantinflas, right? But I must admit, because he answered first, I had more time, right?
Okay.
And the guy and I don't know the name, and pardon my name that I don't know, but the guy that did Chapulín Colorado and those the comedy stuff that guy did when we're talking about sketches and characters, that individual was doing the multiple characters and stuff. So those are the two that I would pick to interview.
Roberto Gómez Bolaños, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Him.
Yeah.
Those
like
two.
El Chavo and Chapulín and all that.
Yeah. Which
awesome.
They're iconic. Mainstream too. So
of course,
I would love to interview. We could do that with you. If our budget probably by season 3. We could do an AI version.
We also have a hologram budget, so maybe we can get it in hologram form.
Can you edit that out? We don't want people to know that. We want to be ahead of the curve.
It's not the best hologram. It's kind of crappy hologram. It's a little delayed. It's like right. It's like a illegal cable box kind of like antenna. You got to move the antenna, to get the good feed.
Yeah. So. Awesome. Okay, well, that's it. Well, thank you so much, Michael and Jamie, for this. It was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
Likewise. Great questions.
Yeah, just in the end, just to finish this, where can people read more about you, follow you, wherever?
Yeah, well, first, season 1 of Translators Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, everywhere you can listen to it. Translators Podcast. We have season of 8 episodes. And for me individually is Juan Bago on Instagram. I think I'm gonna, with the whole Twitter situation, probably you can find me back on MySpace.
Okay.
And yeah,
Wow.
and bringing it back. You know.
All right.
Well, I'd also just like to quickly plug. I have an Audible series that I co-wrote
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
directed. Michelle Rojas is Not Okay, and that stars voices Dasha Polanco, Mero, the kid Mero, Ruben Blades. So that's out there on Audible. Check that out, as well as the Translators. And you can catch me at Instagram, J Ferns. And I think I'm on Twitter. If I'm on Twitter, it's J_Ferns.
Yeah.
But Instagram's fine, J Ferns. So.
He tried to threaten Jay Ferns on Twitter, and
Oh.
No, I didn't try to threaten. I was trying to get Mike to threaten him.
I did, and I got in contact with the son. This guy's like in another country and the whole nine. I was close, but then it's like
I just don't like the underscore. It makes it looks ugly. And then plus saying it, J_Fern.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe one day.
Breaks the rhythm a little, right?
But that's just for Twitter. I don't even know.
You need to get your hive.
It's probably available now. It's probably ever since Elon.
He needs to get his hive, the Fernsies, to hit the J Fern guy. So everyone has a hive.
But thank you for having us on the show. Really appreciate it, and we really enjoyed.
We did. Awesome. We learned about Pump Up the Jam. We never knew that was my song. We're probably we should go to a club and just request that.
Champagne.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much to Michael and Jamie for this conversation, for opening up about their creative process, and most importantly, for the laughs. It's always refreshing to listen to creators who aim to give voice to their community, both with humor and with sincerity. You can find both of them on Instagram, Michael at Juan Bago and Jamie at JFERNZ, so J Ferns, and their podcast at Translators Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 80 Podcasts and on TikTok at Studio 80. Thanks for listening,